All right. Dr. Navarrete, welcome. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you for spending this hour with me today. The title obviously is Parenting During COVID-19, the Working Parent Homeschool Challenge. I want to introduce Dr. Navarrete today. Brenda Navarrete and I have known each other for a minute, for a while here, and she was my director of clinical training at a school that we work at. Dr. Navarrete provides psychological services for survivors of human trafficking at Alabaster Jar Project, and she serves as an adjunct faculty member at Vanguard University. She earned a PhD in clinical psychology with an emphasis in pediatric psychology and cultural studies from Loma Linda University. Dr. Navarrete's diverse clinical background includes assessment, evaluation, and the therapeutic services in hospitals, community mental health, and residential and juvenile detention settings. She served as a director of clinical training at Argus University and has taught graduate psychology at various universities. She has promoted mental health awareness and facilitated program development for her local community and internationally in Rwanda and Honduras. I remember the Rwanda one, Brenda.
Yes.
Dr. Navarrete served as the former president of the Inland Psychological Association. Her research interests include social justice, human trafficking, gender equality, and academic achievement. She has presented her research at professional conferences, both locally and abroad. In addition to her professional career, she's a dedicated wife and a full-time mother of 2 children that she's currently homeschooling during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's welcome Dr. Navarrete to the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I would like for you to take it from here.
All right.
I am going to turn off the video, so because I'm going to stop this videos for right now. All right, let's go.
All right. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who's here. I really appreciate you joining us, and thank you, Dr. Marino, for this opportunity to be part of the Family Matters series. And I appreciate this opportunity. And I just want to commend all of you who are here and listening in. Your very presence here kind of demonstrates your resiliency during this time and your commitment to being an intentional parent. This is a difficult time. These are unprecedented times. We couldn't have expected this. We didn't know this was coming. And it's brought a lot of new challenges to us as parents, to us as a community. And it's a scary time, or it can be a very scary time. Most parents are not trained as teachers, right? And now we have the challenge of teaching our own children at home. My goal for today is to provide you with some resources, with some techniques, with some ideas, things that will help you in that process. I have a mental health background, so my perspective is mental health. And we know that if a child that is not doing well emotionally, psychologically, is not able to learn. And so for me, a very foundational part of this is to make sure that we incorporate mental health treatment or mental health support to our children. So we'll be talking about a lot of different things. And it is a little bit of a longer presentation, as I was telling Dr. Marino before we began, because I think I just got really excited about this topic. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I am, as Dr. Marino said, I'm a mother also, and I'm dealing with all of these same issues. I am not a perfect parent, even as I am developing these strategies and preparing them to present to you. I am dealing and working through a lot of the same things. So you are not alone, and we will get through this together, right? And every family, one thing that I do want to point out is every family is different, right? We all have different situations during this pandemic. Some of you may be single parents. Some of you may be transitioning to working from home. Some of you might have essential workers in the home and kind of be on your own. So there's all kinds of different situations. But I think that there are some things that, we can all learn and kind of improve on our skills. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, I want this to be an interactive process. So I'm going to be asking you some questions, and you'll be able to reply in the chat box, I believe it's called. So feel free to, provide your responses when I kind of provide those questions for you. So the homeschool challenge. Let's go ahead and get started. So you may have seen this quote before. It's one of my favorites because, I have done quite a bit of work in mental health. I've worked in different settings. I worked with a lot of adults, inpatient psychiatric, outpatient community counseling, juvenile detention centers. And something that always stands out to me is the experience during childhood. Trauma and the experiences and messages that you receive during childhood tend to stick with you. They tend to influence the way that you live your life and the person that you become, for better or for worse. And while we can't control everything that happens to our children, we do, as parents, play a very central role in their lives. So it's important for us to be intentional, to be informed, and to do our best to be the best parent we can, right? So this is a quote by Frederick Douglass that I love. And it says, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And I think this still rings true, and it always will, right? That the work that we do as parents might be the biggest influence and the biggest mark that we leave on this earth, right? It's the most sacred journey I think that we will take, and the most sacred relationship that we'll have. So again, I commend you for being here and for wanting to work on those skills with me. So one question that I do want to ask you, so maybe we can get that text box started. I'm not really sure. I've never actually used our chat box. I haven't used it myself. So I'm hoping that it will just pop up, or that you all might be more tech savvy than me and know how to use it. But why are you here? Or I guess more specifically, for who are you here? Do you have kids at home that you're homeschooling? And if you are, how many and what are their ages? So if you can provide that, that would be great. So
they can type it in the chat box.
Okay, you can type that in the chat box. So here's the topics. Here's kind of the overview of what I'll be talking about today. First, I'm going to be talking about setting routines. We have heard a lot about setting routines, right? That's kind of the first thing that you hear when people talk about homeschooling and all of that. But I want to, take that a step further and provide some guidance on how you can set routines and share some techniques to help make these routines more effective.
You have some responses already.
Okay.
So you have 2 kids at home, 9 and 7, two kids at home, 7 and 6, 5, 7 and 9, 1 child, 2 years old.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not able to see that. Is that normal?
Yeah, that's fine. You're unable. Okay. That's why I'm your eyes right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also want to talk about how to construct a productive learning environment at home, and that to kind of help kids get in the mindset of learning, and walk you. And I want to talk about working from home while homeschooling, because I know many of you are transitioning to doing that as well. And I also want to share some simple strategies for helping kids cope with some of the emotional difficulties during this time. Because as I mentioned before, psychological and neurological research tells us that kids can't learn if they're not coping well emotionally. And we have seen that even in our own lives, right? Where when we're under a lot of stress or we're in a high tense situation, our minds don't think clearly. So it's really important for us to address our kids' mental health in order for them to be able to function and learn appropriately. Some of the aspects that I want to address specifically is helping your kids identify and express their emotions. Usually when we are starting any kind of therapeutic process with children, that is the first step, right? Is being able to express your emotions and identify what those emotions are and express them. And, in fact, even as adults, sometimes we have a hard time doing that. So that is kind of the first step in what we do and when working with kids. And also I want to talk about dealing with uncertainty as far as mental health. These are times with a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to anxiety. So That's something that I'll be discussing too. And kind of a note on these things, of some of the activities that I have for you to share with your children may seem a little like silly, I guess, or for lack of a better word, but I want to highlight the importance of play. For children,
Absolutely.
play is their language. Play is their world. And so if you want to be able to communicate effectively with children, you need to be able to use their language, right? And enter their world. So I'm going to be incorporating a lot of, or we incorporate a lot of play. So any of you who work with children in a school or other setting, you've been exposed to that. So some of these activities, again, will seem a little, I guess, silly because we actually kind of try to enter their world in order to communicate effectively with them and to gain their participation and cooperation. And then I'm going to talk about parental care or self-care, and then share some final thoughts with you. So setting routines. The importance of a routine, it can't be stated enough, and it goes for typically developing children as well as children with developmental differences and children of all ages. It helps create more certainty, making life more predictable, more certain, which it's really not right now, right? We're dealing with so many changes. It also provides a set time to do things. So it helps eliminate room for negotiations, which, any of you who've been around children or have children, you know that they are very good at trying to negotiate. And, and also, I want you to know that this won't be easy at first, that it's a big transition and it takes time. Parents need to take it easy on themselves and on their kids too, because, we are not trained, we're not trained as teachers. And so this is just going to take time, and it's okay for it to be a gradual process. Don't expect to kind of write out an 8-hour school day and expect it to go over well, right, on day one. So, but I do want to talk to you about some of the essential components of routines and strategies that will help gain child cooperation, because we can come up with all these routines and post them on our refrigerator and have them ready and they look great on paper, but unless kids are interested, it's really not going to work. So one of the things that I think is probably the most important is that it needs to be a collaborative process, right? It's probably one of the most important aspects of adherence. In fact, psychology will tell you that even working with adults or any group, when you get people to cooperate and be a part of it, they're much more likely to participate and to be excited about it and to work towards it. So I encourage for you to get kids to take part in the creation of the schedule, have them come up with ideas, find out what their preferences are, and find a way to incorporate and tailor your routine accordingly, whenever possible. So setting routines. So I would suggest setting time points. So like blocks of time as opposed to a list. Kids tend to respond a lot better to that. And use a timer. Let's see, I did bring mine so I could show you. This has actually worked miracles. You wouldn't expect it to be so effective, but it has been. But it's this clock, and I'll show you kind of how it works. It actually will highlight in red the time that is left over or is left. So for example, my daughter cannot tell time yet, right? She's only 4 years old, but she's able to look at the clock and kind of get a sense of how much time is left. And even my older son can kind of take a quick glance and see how much time is left. So it kind of provides them with, because a child's understanding of time is developing still. And so when you tell them, you're going to work for 30 minutes or an hour, that might seem kind of endless for them. So setting something like that in front of them that they're able to see and something that they understand can be really helpful.
That's good.
And also, I want to talk about choice. Even though structure of a routine may seem rigid, it's important to provide choices within each time block whenever possible. People love choices, right? We we like to feel that we are choosing. And sometimes it's almost a perception of choice for kids, right? Because you can say, hey, you can do either science or math, or you can do science, math, or spelling, when, in fact, they're all things that need to get done that day. But for some reason, that perception of choice can be really powerful and getting them motivated,
Perception of choice.
getting their participation. And also, something that I want to encourage is to be flexible in what you think of as school or learning. Don't try to replicate your school. And that was kind of something that I think I did a little at first, because I was worried about what my son was missing out on and wanted to try to replicate kind of what he does at school. But let's think outside of the box. This is a unique opportunity, if we choose to see it that way, to incorporate kind of more atypical and experiential learning, like baking or gardening or laundry or sewing. Learning something new at home is still learning, right? In fact, this is an area of learning that kids or students rarely have to develop in school, in like traditional school. So it's a unique opportunity to share those things with your kids. The community is your classroom, right? As far, of course, there's some limitations given our stay home way of life right now, but think back at when you were a child, and kind of the experiences that you had, back in the time when we kind of took care of ourselves, I guess, or, did things outside. When I was a kid, for example, my mom worked nights, and she would try to sleep during the day when we were home. And so we didn't have a lot of money for extracurricular activities or for a babysitter. But what she would do is that she would take us into the backyard and fill plastic pitchers with water and loosen dirt with a shovel, and basically said, go have fun. And we would just make things out of mud. And we often added things like soap and flower petals and sticks and, basically whatever we could find while she napped. And we experimented with different combinations to create different textures and figure out what worked best for our creations. While I'm not like advocating to not supervise your children, I am advocating for you to think outside the box, right? Yeah. Although my mother had like no formal degree or anything, she facilitated the process for us to learn about physics and chemistry and measurement and, math and all of that through our mud play, right? Because children learn in experiential ways as well. So, don't underestimate the power of those experiences and those learning experiences as well. So my next point here that I want to talk about is breaks from physical activity. Getting your energy out is also a really important part of daily routine. And we want to provide choices there too. It helps them settle down, right, when it is time to study. It also improves mental health and positive emotions. It increases positive feelings. So it's really important to make sure that we create opportunities for them to get a lot of physical activity out. And, because we talk about giving them breaks. And I think for my kids, for example, my son would probably play Minecraft every single break he got. So I have to make sure that I set aside a time that says, okay, it's break, but you have to do something active. And it didn't work for me too, to say, okay, go do something physical, go do exercise or go run outside. It kind of helped to show them a list and say, okay, pick a couple activities from this list. So I included some activities for you here, some kid-friendly exercise ideas. So you can show kids a list similar to this, and you can say, okay, pick a couple activities. And these can be, all very fun. Now, and by the way, there is going to be a copy of the PowerPoint available to you afterwards. So I know some of my slides seem very busy, but that's also because I wanted to make sure that a lot of this information was written down for you. So if you wanted to look back or get any ideas, you could do that.
Brenda, I just want to say, I know some people are typing questions. Just type your questions. Amber's hand is up. Can you, we're going to take questions after the presentation. So please type it in so we don't forget it. We want to get to your questions, but we'll get to you, Amber, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. I think I pushed that by accident. Trying to get to the chat.
Hi, Amber. So, you know, and these ideas here, of course, there's many more. And then I also really want to encourage you to, you know, go on YouTube. I mean, YouTube, especially if you have a smart TV or on your computer or anywhere really, they have, you know, everything you can think if you just type in like kids aerobics or yoga for kids, or, you know, they have really creative ways. I know there's a lot of videos from the UK that I use that they incorporate storytelling into yoga. So they're telling them to stretch out like an elephant's trunk, and, you know,
Oh, that's cute.
yeah, so it incorporates, you know, play,
Yeah.
like what we talked about, the importance of play, and really enters their world, and they don't even realize they're doing, you know, something that is triggering kind of their relaxation response, but they're just having fun. They're just being told a story, and they're listening to a story. And, you know, there's so many things that sometimes we don't think of, like bubble wrap attack, where if you happen to find a, you know, a container with bubble wrap that you used a few years ago, or something was wrapped in, you can set it on the floor and tell the kids, you know, bubble wrap attack for 20 seconds, go. And, you know, they can get there and stomp their feet and pop the bubbles. Or you can set up, you know, a balance beam on the floor using tape or chalk. So those are kind of some of the ideas that I have up here.
Nice.
You know, there are so many options. The internet is such a great resource for that. And in all of these activities and in all of these ideas, I really want to encourage you to tailor to your kids. Think of your kids' interests. Think of what they enjoy, what they like, because those are the things that they're most likely to, you know, participate in and enjoy. So here is an example of our routine. Now, I must say it has changed over time, and I'm sure that it will continue to change. For example, we began with, you know, shorter. First, I started with like hour-long time blocks that I expected my kid to stay focused and do his work. And then I realized that didn't work. So I had to shorten it and then shorten it again. And then, and now I'm starting to be able to increase it. But I realized that I had to provide kind of off and on time blocks. So I would say, okay, 20 minutes on, 10 minutes off, 20 minutes on, 10 minutes off. And pretty soon I started noticing that at the 20-minute mark, I'd look over and he was still focused and working, so I could turn it up a little, you know, add a little more time. And pretty soon we've been doing kind of longer time blocks as he kind of becomes more accustomed to the working from home schedule. So something that, you know, I want to highlight is, you know, this regular routine, things like getting dressed, right? I like wearing my pajamas all day as much as anybody else, and my kids do too. But something like waking up and getting dressed for your day, it kind of triggers, you know, this is the start of our day. This is the start.
Absolutely.
When we are productive and we have something to do. So I really do encourage, you know, actually getting up and getting dressed, having breakfast the same way you would, you know, when they were going to school. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but for my, you know, for my kids, I realized that like my daughter also does work, but she does, you know, more like tracing and more play oriented. She's only 4, so it's a little different. But like for my son, you know, some of his harder tasks are like math. He has quite a bit of math homework and stuff like that. So I noticed that he's not a morning person, so I had to move those to a little bit later in the day. And so be sensitive
That's
to
good.
kids, you know, evening versus morning tendencies. So as you can see, you know, I have a free time scheduled throughout the day, but my first free time in the morning, it's a free time, but they have to create something. So I want to trigger kind of that time for imagination and creation and building. And so it can be Legos, it can be building blocks. Sometimes if they want to cook something, you know, that's a time that we would do it. So some free times I have a little bit more specified that I want them to have free play, but it has to be kind of more directed towards going outside if the weather's nice, or, you know, creative or whatever that might be. Now, another thing that changed for me as I moved through this process is I used to want to start at 8:30 and be done with the school day at about 2:30, 3:30, and then say, okay, we're done, because we would be done, you know, if they were in school. And that didn't work because I found that, you know, I was pressuring them all morning, and then come 3 o'clock, we were done with our day and there wasn't a whole lot else to do. So it actually worked better, and it took pressure off of everybody to just spread it out throughout the day. So Again, this is just my schedule. It doesn't mean that it would work for you, but I just kind of wanted to show you an example of what one might look like. And also keep in mind that some days, you know, this schedule is going to go out the window, right? It's not going to work. Something comes up, everybody's off, and that's okay. That's okay. This is a tough time for everybody. And so, you know, we need to be flexible and have a schedule. But if it doesn't go that way, that's okay too. But I noticed that having one, you know, even my kids I'd say, you know, let's do this. And they'd say, oh, let's go see what's on our schedule. What time is it? And they'd run over, and they kind of are excited about the idea of having a schedule, surprisingly. So
That's good.
and then one quick note that I want to make too is rewards. A lot of parents are, you know, there's different opinions about rewards, rewarding children for activities that you consider part of every day, things that they should do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they don't need to be rewarded for that. But that, you know, that's something that you may want to reconsider if that's kind of how you feel just during this time, right? Because there's so much transition, there's so much change. We are asking a lot of ourselves and our children. So rewards might be, you know, something that might work. And they are receiving rewards at school, right? Kids, most of the time they get tickets, or there's different reward systems. So even during their school day for quote unquote regular activities, they are receiving rewards. So I wanted to show you kind of an example of, you know, how you can tailor things to gain cooperation. And I'm going to use the example of my son. So there were some days where the routine, which kind of got a little boring, you know, that just, let's go look at our schedule, let's go look at our routine. And they were kind of not too excited about that. So here's an example of kind of what I did for my son. So one of the things we've gotten to do or during this time at home is watch The Mandalorian. He's a huge Star Wars fan. And so instead of just our routine, we called it today's mission, right? Today's Mandalorian mission. And he got like interested in it again after that. So all I did is just like printed off a little picture that I found on Pinterest, you know, and pasted it up there, and he was like excited about it again. So sometimes it takes a little creativity to get them motivated again. One of the things that I put on the mission, or that I would encourage you if you do something like this, is to put a few things on there that are very doable, right? Because we all want to feel productive. And we want to feel successful. And this is a time where I think a lot of people and kids are feeling maybe not as productive. So things like staying at home, washing my hands, being a germ blaster, you know, are all things that kind of incorporate activities that are very doable. And one of the big challenges that I had, and I think I can't imagine, you know, I think it probably is for most parents, is getting my child to be motivated and to stay on task. You know, I look over there and he's like picking at his pencil, or he's like, you know, finding something in his hair, and I'm just like, focus, you know, let's get on task. And I felt like I was kind of nagging, for lack of a better word. And so one of the things that we kind of came up with is ninja style, where he's really into ninjas. He's got ninja costumes, as you can see there. And we came up with the idea of ninja style, which is ninjas do things super quickly without you even realizing what they've done. They speed around and they're very agile. And so when I tell him, you know, let's try to get this done ninja style, it kind of seems to work a lot better, because it's more about fun and play than it is about work. So one of the things that I'd like for you to do and contribute into the chat box is, you know, what are some ideas, like for some characters or interests that your child has that you might be able to use to help motivate them and incorporate into the routines or into your language when you're trying to encourage them or motivate them.
Yeah, please say that again.
The question?
Yes, please.
Sure. So think of what do you think might motivate your child? What characters or themes are they into that might be motivating for them? All right, now constructing a productive learning environment or space at home. One of the most important components of making a routine effective is and homeschooling effective is having a dedicated space just for doing schoolwork. And the reason for this is that kids are used to going to school where everything in the environment is focused on learning. You know, everything on the walls, the whole school is built to promote learning. And they primarily associate school with learning and home with time off or family time. And now we need to dedicate a space of the house to that. A space of the house a day associate with learning time, with school time. And we don't want the whole house to feel like that, right? Because it's still important for them to have a space, to have family time, and to feel like it's a place where they can relax and have fun with family. But we also want kids' minds and their bodies to get in the groove of, you know, okay, this is my workspace. This is my work chair. This is my work table. And this is where all my schoolwork gets done. This is the place where I'll come in tomorrow morning and I'll complete my work for the day. And, you know, this goes along with the same line as, it's in the same lines as getting dressed in the morning, right? You just want them to get into the mindset of productivity. And this will look, you know, the people's workspace will look very different depending on what you have available. But in general, you want to set up a space that has, you know, some privacy. You don't want a lot of distractors, major distractors like windows. If your child gets distracted by looking outside often, or for me, you know, I had to separate my two kids. For some people that they might be able to work together and it might motivate, they might be able to motivate each other. But for me, it just, that wasn't working. It was definitely more of a distractor. I think there's because they're at very different places. You know, so they're doing very different things. So I think for me, I had to kind of separate them. But you know, you want them to also still be able to have access to you. So I kind of set spaces up where I figured I would probably spend most of my time in the kitchen while they worked. So I'm able to kind of see them from there, and there's a wall between them. So it kind of worked out for me. And again, collaboration here is so important. Have your kids make a sign with a paper that says, you know, Zachary's school corner or Savannah's school corner. And
that's nice.
You know, have them make a sign, have them decorate it, have them be a part of it. For us, you know, I asked the kids kind of, what do you think is missing from your school space? And they said an electric pencil would be so amazing. You know, we didn't have one. So I thought, well, that's great. You know, it was a small item, inexpensive. I could order it on Amazon, but now we have an electric pencil and they labeled it as their special school electric pencil. So little things like that can sometimes just kind of make it feel more special to them and get them kind of motivated. So I want to talk a little bit about working from home while homeschooling. So I love this play on working 9 to 5, and it rings so true. You may have already seen it. It's all over. It's been on social media, but it's Dolly Parton, and she's saying working 9 to 9:10, 9:45 to 10, 10:20 to 10:35. And then, you know, maybe the kids take a nap, so you have a bigger chunk of time from 12:30 to 2 after you've fed them and all of that, you know, between 10:35 and 12:30. So you are going to constantly be interrupted, right? This is, I think, one of the biggest struggles of working from home. I mean, you're transitioning from that high-paced, focused, productive office work environment to a loud, inefficient environment with constant interruptions. So that's something that we kind of have to expect, right? Especially at first, as we're transitioning and as we're, you know, learning how to make this work. So there's a few things that I think, you know, I think will help. And that is, first of all, you know, maintain communication with your employer and see if there's any flexibility in work hours. They are going through the same thing. They know that everybody else is going through the same thing. So even though changing work hours and all of that may have not been possible before, there may be more flexibility now. So it's worth asking. And just like we talked about for the kids, you know, set up your work area and establish like a workspace that helps limit the constant interruptions. It will still happen and you still want to be able to supervise your kids, but you know, be thoughtful in where you set up your space. And again, just like the kids, have that be the area that is for your work. One idea that I really like is the work boxes. So this is something that I have done in the past where, you know, you set up, and it doesn't have to be a box. If you don't have box, you can put it in Ziploc bags, but basically you put in a couple activities in each one, and you can kind of step out, check on the kids, and hand them one bag that has, you know, Legos and, you know, Play-Doh. And then, you know, you come in and you check on them 20 minutes, you know, half hour later, and you hand them another bag, and it has like a puzzle and it has something else. So sometimes, you know, separating activities and giving them kind of a set, you know, box of activities at a time can kind of extend the amount of time that they remain focused.
That's good.
There's also a lot of online resources and things like art lessons, Spanish lessons. You know, one of the things that's kind of exciting about this time is that you can explore topics with your kids that they may not be exposed to at school. Mm-hmm. So like for us, we've been trying to focus a little bit more on Spanish. And so, you know, I found a lot of really good YouTube Spanish videos for kids. So you can always kind of play that and get a little bit more work done, and without feeling too guilty about, you know, putting them, you know, having them have more screen time or whatever, because it really can be educational because it's really evolved. So there's so many resources available. And especially now, I think because everybody's going through this, so many industries are creating online options now. And, you know, communicate with your family that you need to work as a team now, and everybody pitches in. You know, before, as parents, we might have been able to run the household and let the kids just focus on school and their studies, but now there's kind of a changed need for all of us to work together and for kids to have more responsibilities maybe in the home, and understand that you might, you know, need time to complete your work as well. And try to sync the schedules of different age groups in order for you to have free time when you are both engaged. And structure your schedule by how much focus do you need. So for me, what that means is, you know, their longest break, I try to manipulate kind of their schedule so that their longest break, they're able to have lunch and have the break next to each other. So I can actually put on a movie for them if that's what they want to do. And a movie I know engages them, and they probably won't come out. So that's usually when I do my groups online, or, you know, other things where I know they're least likely to interrupt me. Now, lower your expectations though, because kids might still come in. And I have a great example of that. I actually was running a group with my survivors, and you know, right in the middle of the group, for some reason, I think something went wrong, and the kids ran in, and for some reason, my son ran back behind the computer and stuck his face down right here. So the ladies had a wonderful view up his nose, right? So these things will happen probably. And I was kind of mortified and felt very unprofessional, but you know, it got so many laughs. Yeah. And it was such a, like, almost like a tension releaser. And in fact, after that, the ladies asked if they could see my kids after, you know, every time after that. I mean, they loved it. So, you know, in the end, it's okay. It works out. You know, I think we just have to kind of have a mind shift that this is our way of life now, right now. And so if those things happen, you know, it's okay. But of course, if you have another parent in the home or another caregiver, you're able to, you know, exchange, you know, take shifts with the kids depending on when you need time. Also, one thing that has worked for me, I found that, you know, I'd set up the kids and I would have maybe 10-15 minutes at a time free before the next one needed help or the next one needed help. And so something that helped me was things like, you know, meal prepping on the weekends, trying to catch up on things like laundry or the house or anything, other tasks that weren't necessarily like time sensitive on the weekend, so that when I was off, I would be able to do some of my work during those little time slots, instead of saying, oh, I got to, prepare a meal for myself or prepare a meal for the kids. That would kind of be done. And so I could just focus on, getting something else done that was more time sensitive. So the role of mental health for children during COVID-19. As I stated earlier, I come from a mental health background. So even as we're talking about schooling, I think mental health is so important to discuss. And this, again, it's just from social media. You may have seen it before, but it's kind of a letter to parents from teachers. And it says, don't stress about schoolwork. In September, I will get your children back on track. I am a teacher, and that is my superpower. What I can't fix is social emotional trauma that prevents the brain from learning. So right now, I just need you to share your calm, share your strength, and share your laughter with your children. No kids are ahead, no kids are behind. Your children are exactly where they need to be. With love, all the teachers on planet Earth. So I like that because it puts into perspective. I think
Absolutely.
sometimes as parents, it's easy to feel like our kids are falling behind, and that responsibility of keeping them on track. But it's much easier to catch a child up, right, academically, than it is to heal some of the trauma that may occur, during this time. So even though we're talking here about homeschooling and school, I think mental health is really one of the most important things that we can do, and one of the most important things that we can address. And now I also realize that you're not a mental health specialist, right? Just like we're not teachers, or a lot of you are not teachers, a lot of you are not mental health specialists or therapists. But one of the things that I want to do during this time is to give you a few strategies, a few mechanisms that you can do to improve your child's mental health. And there's simple.
Dr. Navarrete, you have 5 minutes, and then we take questions.
Okay. So I will run through these. Now you can kind of look at this on your own. This one, it just says that, kind of some of the things that kids might be wondering about, or things that you can say to your kids. But I did put together kind of a feelings chart. Now I purposefully got all of this information off of Pinterest so that you can see what's out there and access it yourself. These are charts that help children identify emotions. So, and again, I tailored it to different people. I thought, okay, this is what I would use for my daughter because she's so into princesses. So it's a feelings chart where she can identify feelings, or even just point to them. She doesn't need to be able to read them, but but it's tailored to her interests. So she might be more interested in participating. And feel free to get creative, use your own language. And then I also have a feelings thermometer where kids can come over and choose kind of how they're feeling, the intensity of their feelings. And be able to say, you know what, I feel like right here, I'm at a red right now. I'm so angry, or, I'm feeling like unhappy, right? I'm at a 3, or whatever that might be. And again, you can tailor this to your own child's interests, and that will get them much more engaged. A lot of times kids, and it from our observation, we'll see this too. They tend to think in terms of 0 to 100, right? So they're okay. And then you see a meltdown, or you see a blow up. And so this process helps them to realize and identify that we have a whole range of emotions, and a variety of intensity of emotions. And depending on how they feel, they can react differently. What you do is that first, you help them identify an emotion, and then you can come up with a little action plan. And this is all simple. You can write it out on a piece of paper, right? So you can say, next time I'm at a 3, what can I do? Well, we can go for a walk. We can separate ourselves from a situation and try a different activity. Or if I'm at a 4, what are we going to do? Well, how about we ride a bike or other physical activity? Or maybe I need to take a break in my room. And these are all things that you can work through with your child. Have them come up with the answers, as you facilitate. And practice these action plans. And they'll be able to realize, hey, I was at a 5. And then when I did these, I came back, and then you can ask them, where are you now? And if they're able to identify that they're at a lower number, you're teaching them, right, that they are regulating their own emotions, that when they feel a certain way, they're able to do something and lower their anxiety or lower their anger. And so really you're teaching them how to regulate and how to kind of have a little more sense of control over their emotions. And this is
Good.
important because they often don't have the language, right? They don't have the language to express how they feel. So, so this will be there for you. And I just kind of drew this up, but again, you know, you can tailor it to your child's interest, their language level and cognitive level and all of that. So you are the biggest expert on your own children. So you'll know, you can figure out what works for them, but this is kind of the main framework.
It's good.
Okay, so one other kind of mental health issue that I want to talk about is uncertainty. Kids are dealing with an increased level of anxiety, and much of it has to do with all the uncertainty that's kind of going on right now. But it's important to acknowledge that each child is different, right? Some of them might not be as anxious, some of them may be less anxious. For example, my daughter, her biggest anxiety is separation. She has a hard time separating from me, from my husband. And so for her, you know, she's just been home. So she, you know, every time I ask her, do you miss school? You miss friends? She's like, no, I'm having a great time. I love being home, right? So her anxiety level has actually been lower. But for most kids, this is a tough time, right? They're being taken away from their friends, or they're having that separation. And so uncertainty also with all the things that are going on and what the coronavirus is all about can be really anxiety provoking. So this is also why structure and routine is so important, because it provides them with a sense of some certainty, some predictability, and some familiarity. So there are regular meal times, and it provides them with more predictable things in a very unpredictable time, I guess you could say. So I drew up a really quick little worksheet that you could do with your kids to kind of help them express uncertainty or feelings of uncertainty. So I drew up something that I thought would work for my daughter. She loves hearts, and her favorite colors are purple and pink. So I, drew two of these. I've seen these made as like clouds or balloons or, whatever works for you. And basically it's a list of things we know and things we don't know right now. And so, you can fill this out with your child. So, this helps you deal with kind of the repetitive questions, right? That your kids might be asking, like, how long is this going to last? When will I be able to see my grandparents next? All of that. So you can fill this out. So like things we know right now, we're making spaghetti tonight. We are, we are going to be having dinner at 6 o'clock, right? Things that are going to happen most likely, but versus the things that we don't know. When you're going to be able to see your friends again, when you're going to be able to go back to school, or when people are going to stop wearing masks. So essentially you're telling your kids, we don't know right now, and that's okay. And we will know. And why don't we just, figure out, focus on what we do know. And once we know more, I will fill you in. So it kind of helps them put it on paper. Sometimes being able to write things down and put things on paper can be really empowering for kids. Let's see. So I can kind of let you guys read this on your own. This has to do with talking to your kids about COVID-19. Some of you maybe have already done this, or this is kind of an issue that you've already gotten past. But I've been asked, and I've seen on social media, parents asking, are you telling your kids about the coronavirus? Or what are you telling your kids? How much should I tell my kids about the coronavirus? So I provided kind of an outline of, what I feel is appropriate to share with your kids and how to share that with them in case you want some guidance on that. So I'm not sure how we're doing on time, so I'm gonna.
No, let's take some questions. Let's
Okay,
take some questions. There's a few questions that we might want to take, and then you can respond to them. I think some of these questions are pretty, they were asked a while ago, and I don't really remember them. I don't want to scroll up. So how about we do it this way?
Okay.
If you have a question, please raise your hand. There's a button there where you can just click and raise your hand, and then I'll call on you you can unmute yourself and ask the question. One that I remember though was about a timer. You know, you showed the timer earlier on, and it says, where did you get that?
Okay, yeah, I should have shared that. I actually got this on, I actually got it at a teacher supply store. I think it was called like A plus or something, but I've seen these on Amazon as well. And you know, this is a really nice one because it has a stand as well. So, but I have seen them on Amazon as well.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Amber. Could you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I have a question. So I have two older boys, 13, 14, and then a 10-year-old. To modify with my 10-year-old, super easy for me. I'm in the kids mode all the time. I do fun play. That's where my jam is. So when it comes to my 13 and 14-year-old, I am not used to having to deal with a lot of the well, your brother wants to do the chalk outside, so we're going to go do that. And they're like, oh my God, can I just, go ride a dirt bike or, but I want it to be family oriented. So I'm like, no, you have to be with us because we're a family and we're doing it together. So I didn't know how to maybe incorporate older kid activities. I know what their interests are, but trying to keep the younger one, engaged as well. I didn't know if there was anything on Pinterest. I haven't really looked anything up yet. Right now, I just had them jot down ideas of what they would like for me to do with them.
Okay.
And then maybe I can, do it maybe 1 hour at a time with them, like just mommy and me time with the 14-year-old and, to make it more appropriate. So I wasn't quite sure how to go about doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I think that's a great question because I think one of the big challenges that we have during this time is that, we have limited resources, right? As far as parental resources, we can't spend one-on-one time with each one of our kids. And especially when there's a time gap, that can be a real challenge. And an age gap. Because they have different interests and they want to be doing different things. And so when you asked your child, to write a list or express their interest, like you mentioned the dirt bike, were there any other motivators that you felt like, you might be able to somehow incorporate into that time?
So they only wrote out two because I told them today because they were just fighting a lot today. I was like, okay, I don't want to go outside and do what Emery's doing. So I told them, I said, you're going to create a list of all the things that I want, that you want to be able to do. And then, we'll figure out how much activity we can do as a reward. But that's as far as we got. We haven't got anywhere. And I was like, I got a Zoom meeting. I got to go. So they're supposed to be working on it right now, but I hear them playing right now. So.
All right. That's understandable. I think that you start that is a great place to start because ultimately, one of the things that the advantages that you have with older children, there's pros and cons, right, to every age. But one of the advantages that you have is that they are more verbal and they are more expressive, and also you acknowledging kind of what their interests are and being able to incorporate them in that process is probably the biggest first step you can take. And I think that you trusted your instinct in doing that, because first of all, with the younger children, we have to kind of identify what their interests are, right? We kind of know them. They might not be able to articulate that or express that. But with the older children, I would kind of go based off of what they express and, make that list and then create choices out of that list. But I think them being able to identify their own interests, their own wishes, their own wants, and then you as a parent, kind of modifying that as needed or making those things available to them as appropriate, right? Because I know they may have, their request may not be something you're able to do right now, but I would definitely have that be kind of your source, and also realize that, you know, as hard as it is for us as parents, you know, realizing that our kids become a little more independent as they grow older, and some of their goals or some of their rewards aren't going to necessarily like include us quite as much. And that's okay, right? As they become more independent and as individuals. But I think and being able to really work on that with them will empower them and also gain kind of buy-in on their end as far as, you know, it being
Okay.
rewarded
Yeah.
for them.
I just try to make it where everything else is stripped away from them. You know, a lot of their choices already been stripped. So I just figured if I gave them the options, they can tell me, you know, yeah, we can go out into the dirt, or we can go dirt biking, or give them some choices instead of having everything ripped away and be like, no, we're going to do this because your brother wants to do it.
Right.
So I
That's
was like,
great.
You know,
okay.
Amber, another thing I was just thinking, they could make, each person could do the other person's activity on that day. So like, you know, your child can do, this is something that both of us can do on a particular day, and on another day we'll do the other person's activity. You know, even though it's a little kid, you know, they can do that. Or, you know, like when my kids were growing up, we would just have a day, a family day, and each person was responsible for that activity. So that way, you know, you don't feel like you have to do it every time, but at least just once in a while, I get to do what you want to do.
Okay. That's a great idea too.
That could work. All right, so we have a lengthy question from Ola. If I can find it. Are you there? Can you Ola, can you unmute yourself and ask your question? Ola, go ahead. Unmute yourself though. You're not. Okay. I'll ask the question because it's Ola, can you ask the question? All right, so here it is. I have to read it. It says, does cultural background or locality issues have to come into play when designing a homeschooling program? Can we impose a standard structure regimen?
Okay, so I think, you know, that's a great question. Absolutely. I think the whole goal in creating a routine and a structure is about what works for you. And what works for you is going to be very different, and it's going to be based on so many different things. It's going to be based on your expectations, which has a lot to do with culture, right? It'll have to do with the age group of your child, the interest of your child, and what works for you as a family, and the environment that you have access to. So I think that, you know, the environment, and I'm not sure exactly kind of what your environment is, but I think that you know, trust your instinct on what will work for your child. And if you are in a setting where only certain things are available to you, or you have, you know, a larger group of children and you're able to create one routine that's more structured and more rigid, but that works for them, then that works for them, right? But you know, I don't know, you know, maybe providing more information on the specifics of your environment, but I think that, you know, culture, it really does kind of form our expectations. And so I absolutely think that might differ a great deal depending on your background, your cultural, you know, ethnic and age, and, you know, everything that incorporates.
And where you are in the world. Yeah.
Where you are in the world.
That works. There's another question, I think is from Bethany. She says, do you have any recommendations on screen time limits for kids who are doing online curriculum now?
Okay, so online curriculum math? So
now.
Now, okay. So I'm assuming she might mean screen time in addition to the online schoolwork.
Bethany, are you there? Do you want to clarify your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
I'm
actually thinking just in general, Brenda, because my kids are suddenly, in order to do their schoolwork, they're on the computer way more than we've allowed them to be in the past. And I'm just wondering if I know our pediatrician in the past has said the AAP recommendations were separate from school, but suddenly school is so much screen time. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on that, or concerns about a total amount, especially for younger children?
Yeah. Okay. I think that in general, I think we might have limitations on what we feel is appropriate for our kids as far as screen time. But I think because of this time that our kids are like really relying on that screen time for educational purposes, that might need to change and be flexible just for this period of time. And I would say, to limit the screen time as far as like their free time, like I think if it's educational and it's an activity based and kind of a positive learning environment, then I would be more flexible to allowing them to spend more time having screen time right now. I know that in general we try to limit that, but I think right now it's become kind of a major source of our learning process, our social process. So what I would do is kind of limit the amount of time, or maybe still limit it the way you did before as far as free time, or doing other activities that are not learning based.
But that's a dilemma, though. That's really something we're going to have to
Yeah, you
grapple with
wonder kind of
for
what would be
time.
kind of the long-term
Yeah.
expectations and repercussions after all of this screen time.
How long should we try the action plan for kids' emotions before we should look for outside help? My kids, especially my daughter, has been acting out during this time.
Okay. Let me go back to this action plan. So what she's referring to is, once they identify their emotions and kind of an intensity, and we try this out, I would say, you want to be able to implement this at home. This is usually the first kind of step in child therapy. We teach them to express their emotion and to learn how to kind of regulate their own emotions, or start to. If you feel like these are not working, like if they go on this chart and they go for a walk and they talk to somebody, say they're at a 5 and they separate themselves and they talk and they do whatever is supposed to relax them, and you've tried online services, if it's not improving their state, and if it's getting in the way of their functioning and their ability to function in society. So if they're not learning appropriately in school, or it's intervening in their relationships with peers and with school, and this doesn't work, then I think it's time to seek professional help. Dr. Marina, do you have any?
No, absolutely. I think, or if the child is constantly at a 5 or 4 or 5, and that's their new norm, and nothing seems to work, or even if it works but then it repeats again, I think it's time to seek help. For me, I think counseling is it's a must for everyone. I mean, that's just my philosophy. Not that it's necessary for every single person, but try it if you think you need help. If you need help. And now you can do telehealth. That's mostly what you can do anyway. And
Right.
so I would reach out if they're going over 4 or 5 and it's constant.
And I want to also note that a lot of people are a little hesitant to go to therapy or counseling when they're not exposed to it in the past. And, a lot of times therapy with kids, it really is just providing them with tools, very similar to what I did here. It's just facilitating a way to communicate with them, to help them express themselves. So it is not kind of a scary process that, will open up things that or cause damage. It really is just about building tools and their own ability to kind of regulate and express their emotions.
Absolutely.